Vander Grant stormed into the glass conference room on the 35th floor of his Manhattan tower, his jaw set and his driver still on the line through his Bluetooth earpiece. "I don't care, Kenneth, just get the car back here in 15, if I have to sit through another." He stopped cold. There was someone already sitting at the long marble table. A woman. She was bent over a laptop, auburn waves falling over her shoulder, completely unaware of the hurricane that had just stepped into the room. A half-empty iced coffee sat beside a stack of color-coded folders. Her heels were off, tucked under the chair, and her bare feet tapped the polished floor as she typed. Vander blinked. This was his building, his office, his conference room. No one used this room without going through 3 layers of assistants. He cleared his throat, loudly. The woman looked up. Her eyes were a striking shade of blue-green, like the ocean when a storm's about to roll in. "Oh, you're not the caterer," he frowned. "Definitely not." She tilted her head. "Then are you with the hotel group?" "Because if you're here for the pitch, you're early by." She checked her watch. 20 minutes, and I booked this room." Vander stepped forward, confused. "I think there's a mistake. This room is reserved under Grant Enterprises. That would be me." She blinked. "Grant," he nodded. She groaned and leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "Of course, this is the week from hell." He crossed his arms. "You're not supposed to be here." She raised her brows. "And yet, here I am." Vander narrowed his eyes. He was used to people backing off when he entered a room. But this woman didn't flinch. "What's your name?" he asked. "Brooklyn Prescott, Prescott Designs. Interior design. Event design." She shut her laptop slowly. "And you're Vander Grant, the real estate billionaire who hasn't returned a single one of my team's emails about this room being double booked." He blinked again. "Wait, that was you?" She nodded. "Yep, my team reserved this space 3 weeks ago through your coordinator, Monica. Then apparently your assistant overrode it last minute for some emergency meeting. And now I'm stuck trying to pitch a $10 million wedding contract to a luxury hotel group in a hallway unless you're okay with sharing." He hesitated. "Sharing?" She stood and grabbed her folders. "Look, I've got 10 minutes before they get here. You've clearly got somewhere to be. But if you're set on staying, I'll take the left half of the table, you can take the right, and we'll pretend this is normal." Vander almost laughed. No one talked to him like this. She wasn't impressed by his money or power. She wasn't interested in kissing up or backing down, and weirdly he liked it. "Fine," he said after a beat. "We'll share." She raised a brow. "Great. And if you're gonna be in here, maybe don't talk on the phone like you're yelling at your driver." "I wasn't yelling." She gave him a look. Okay, maybe he was. 10 minutes later, the hotel group walked in 2 suited executives and a well-dressed woman in pearls. Vander watched from his side of the table as Brooklyn transformed, confident, sharp, charming. She laid out samples, sketches, and budget breakdowns without missing a beat. Her hands moved as she spoke, expressive and sure, and her passion lit up the room. It was impressive. No, it was captivating. When they left, promising to follow up soon, Brooklyn let out a long breath and slumped into her seat again. Vander found himself speaking before thinking. "You're good." She looked at him, surprised. "Thanks. That means something coming from the man who owns half the city." He gave a small shrug. "Maybe not half," she grinned. "Just a third." He cracked a smile. "Something like that." There was a pause. One of those rare, quiet moments where the air shifted. "You ever design events for billionaires?" he asked suddenly. She leaned back. "That depends. Are you the kind who wants fireworks, floating bars, and a yacht entrance?" "Would that win you over?" She blinked. "Win me over?" He stood slowly, adjusting the cuff of his jacket. "Just wondering, in case I ever needed to book someone like you." Her eyes narrowed, but she was smiling. "You couldn't afford me." He leaned in slightly, voice lower. "I'm a billionaire, remember?" She tilted her head. "Then you should know some things aren't for sale." The elevator dinged outside. He looked down at her, amused. "You've got guts, Brooklyn Prescott. And you've got a serious scheduling problem, Vander Grant." He stepped out of the room, but not before glancing back once. She was already back at her laptop, tapping away, her brows slightly furrowed. He didn't realize it yet, but that moment, the overbooked room, the woman who refused to be impressed, was the beginning of something that would change his life. Not just because she'd challenged him. But because she was about to steal his heart, the next time Vander saw her, she was elbow-deep in silk drapes, not the metaphorical kind, actual silk. Pale champagne-colored bolts draped over a long table in the atrium of the Century Building, one of his newest properties. He paused by the glass railing on the mezzanine, his morning espresso in hand, watching her orchestrate her team with the precision of a conductor mid-symphony. "Those need to cascade cleanly, not cling like hospital curtains," Brooklyn said, tugging the fabric free from a junior assistant's trembling hands. "And if the lighting guy doesn't show in the next 30 minutes, I'm swapping to battery-powered lanterns and praying for ambience." She looked up then, catching him watching. "Didn't realize this was your building too," she called up to him. He descended the black marble stairs, his pace measured. "I own the block, didn't expect to find you here." Brooklyn motioned around. "Private fundraiser. One of your tenants booked the space through my firm. I'm transforming it into a garden under glass." He glanced at the towering ceilings, the sleek modern walls now half covered in vines and delicate white branches. "You're turning steel and stone into Eden. That's the idea." She pulled a strand of hair behind her ear. "What brings you here, Mr. Grant?" "I like to inspect my investments, especially when someone's hanging foliage from my chandeliers." "You're welcome to leave a review after the event." He walked slowly toward the table where she'd laid out a series of renderings. "You always this hands-on, only when I care about the result," she glanced at him. "Which apparently is always. Perfectionist, control freak." He tapped the edge of one of the sketches, which featured a suspended floral arch over an ice sculpture. "This centerpiece. It's a little over the top, isn't it?" "Not if you're trying to impress the head of the Metropolitan Arts Trust. She's known to be allergic to boring." His brow lifted. "You're designing this for her. She's the guest of honor. And if I land her as a client, it opens every cultural venue in the city." He studied her for a moment. There was a different kind of ambition in her eyes, not the greedy kind he was used to seeing. Hers burned with something sharper, earned. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" he asked. "No one remembers safe." She turned to her team. "We need fresh peonies, the ones we got are bruised." Vander stepped aside as two interns hurried past him. "You ever stop to breathe? Maybe on Tuesdays. Between midnight and 1. He chuckled under his breath, then gestured toward the main entrance. "Let me take you to lunch." She raised a brow. Now. Brooklyn looked down at her clipboard, then back at him. "I have 32 tasks to finish in the next 4 hours. I'll have my staff handle the peonies, and your lighting guy arrived 3 minutes ago. He's unloading crates outside." She gave him a suspicious look. "How do you know that?" "I've got eyes everywhere." He didn't elaborate. She hesitated. Her fingers tightened slightly on her clipboard, calculating. Then she set it down. "Fine, but only if you don't try to talk business." "I won't." They were in his car within 5 minutes. Not a standard black SUV like the ones ferrying CEOs around Midtown, but a deep navy Bentley, polished to a mirror finish. It hummed through the streets like it owned them. Brooklyn didn't comment, but her fingers brushed the leather stitching of her seat more than once. The restaurant was tucked down a narrow street in Tribeca. No signage, just a single wrought iron lantern over an arched door. A host greeted Vander by name and led them to a private terrace lined with ivy and flickering candles. "You bring all your event designers here?" she asked, glancing around. "Only the ones who yell at me in my own conference rooms," she laughed. "That narrows the list." A bottle of wine appeared without being requested. Vander barely acknowledged it. Brooklyn watched him closely as he poured her a glass. "You're used to getting what you want," she said. He met her gaze. "Usually. And when you don't, I find a better way." She leaned back in her chair. "That sounds dangerous. Only if you're standing in the way." The waiter brought a delicate plate of grilled sea bass with lemon risotto set before her like a miniature sculpture. Brooklyn stared at it. "You do know I usually eat lunch over a trash can in a warehouse, right? Consider this an upgrade." She tried the fish. Her eyes widened slightly. "Okay, I take it back. I'm never going back to warehouse lunches. I could make that permanent." She looked at him again, careful now. "I don't need a benefactor." "I wasn't offering that." Then what are you offering? Time, he said. Distraction, maybe something more. Brooklyn set her fork down. I don't do maybe. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then let's make it definite. There was a pause. The city buzzed faintly in the background, distant and irrelevant. You realize I can't be bought, she said. I'm not trying to buy you. Then what's the angle? No angle. His voice dropped. You walked into my life without knocking. And now I can't stop looking. For a moment she didn't reply, then she picked up her wine, took a small sip and said quietly, Your trouble? Maybe, but you're the one who walked into my building. She laughed again, softer this time. Touché, they didn't talk much after that. The rest of the meal passed in comfortable silence. When he dropped her back at the venue, she stepped out of the car and turned to face him. I have to finish that install. I know, she paused. You'll be at the event tonight? I will now. She nodded once, then disappeared through the glass doors. As the car pulled away, Vander didn't look back. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about profits, acquisitions, or quarterly reports. He was thinking about a woman draped in silk and sunlight, who'd looked him in the eye and called him dangerous. And he couldn't wait to see what she'd do next. Brooklyn didn't look up as Vander entered the gala that night, but she felt him. She was standing by the bar, clipboard tucked under her arm, giving final instructions to the string quartet before the first guests took their seats. Everything had come together. The hanging florals cast soft shadows across the marble floor, the candlelight reflected in the glass walls like fireflies, and the scent of white blossoms drifted through the air like a secret. But Brooklyn's chest tightened the moment she sensed him behind her. You're early, she said without turning. I wanted to see the place before the crowd ruined the view. She faced him then. He was in a midnight blue suit that caught the light in all the right places, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been sewn onto him. No tie, of course not. Vander Grant didn't need one to look like he owned the world. You clean up well, she said, folding her arms. So do you. His eyes swept over her, lingering longer than they should have. She wore a structured ivory jumpsuit, nothing frilly, nothing soft. Just clean lines and strength with a gold cuff on one wrist and her hair pulled back, sharp and polished. I thought you didn't mix business and pleasure, she said. I didn't say that. I said I wasn't offering business. You came to a fundraiser hosted by one of your own tenants. That's not pleasure. I came because I was invited, and because I wanted to see what happened when you turned my building into a forest. Brooklyn tilted her head, and it's better than I imagined. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to watch a server pass by with a tray of crystal flutes. Have dinner with me again, he said after a moment. She exhaled. You're persistent. I'm curious. About what? He stepped closer. About what you'd be like when you're not working. She gave a quiet laugh. That version of me doesn't exist. I'm always working. Then let me see what happens when you stop pretending that's a problem. Brooklyn turned to face him again, and for a split second her expression cracked. Not a smile, not defiance, something softer. I'm not impressed by power, Vander. I know. That's why I keep coming back. Before she could respond, the coordinator waved her over from across the room. She gave Vander a look. Duty calls. I'll be waiting. He watched her walk away, weaving through the glittering crowd of donors, socialites, and city officials, but his focus never shifted. Brooklyn didn't look back. Later that night, after the final toast and the applause had faded into jazz, she found him near the terrace doors, a glass of something amber in his hand. You stayed, she said. I wanted to see how it ended. She leaned against the railing beside him. The Arts Trust chair asked for my card. You're surprised. I've been chasing her for almost a year. Then tonight was worth it, she glanced at him. I didn't do this for her or for you. I know. Silence settled between them, thicker than the music drifting from the ballroom. Outside, the city blinked around them, windows glowing like stars, traffic humming below like a distant heartbeat. Why did you really come tonight? She asked, voice low. Because I've been thinking about you since the moment you told me I couldn't afford you. She looked away. I meant professionally. I didn't. Brooklyn laughed once, dry and quiet. You don't even know me. I'm trying to. That's the problem. You're used to skipping steps. He turned toward her. Then tell me what I'm missing. She hesitated. You want real, always. My dad was a carpenter. My mother waited tables until her joints gave out. I built this business from nothing. I've been told no more times than I can count. I've been dismissed, overlooked, undercut, and still I'm here. Vander's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes darkened with respect. You think that scares me? He asked. I think it should. He didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black envelope. No logo, no branding, just clean matte paper. What's that? An invitation. She eyed it warily before taking it. Don't open it here, he said. Wait until you're alone, her brows lifted. Is this some kind of game? No. It's something I've never done before. She slid the envelope into her clutch. You're not going to explain. I don't believe in talking things to death. Then what do you believe in? He took a step closer. Moments. And knowing when they matter. The air between them changed again, no longer playful or curious. It was electric. Brooklyn's phone buzzed in her handbag. She didn't look at it. I have to help break down the install, she said after a long pause. I'll walk you out. She shook her head. Don't. His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. She started to go, then turned back. What happens if I open this and say no? Then I'll find another way. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she didn't. She walked away, heels clicking against the tile, her back straight, her steps measured. Vander stayed where he was, his hand still warm from where it had brushed hers. He hadn't planned any of this, not the double-booked room, not the shared lunch. Not this gnawing pull in his chest every time she walked away. But now he couldn't imagine letting her go. Back in her apartment, Brooklyn dropped her clutch on the kitchen counter and pulled out the envelope. She didn't open it at first. She just stared at it. Then, slowly, she broke the seal. Inside was a single card, handwritten, a time, a location, and 4 words, no business, just us. She stared at it for a long time, then she poured herself a glass of water, set the card on the counter, and walked into the bedroom without a word. She didn't know if she'd go. But she knew, without question, that he was different, and that terrified her more than anything else. Brooklyn stood on the rooftop helipad of a dormant skyscraper in Soho, clutching her coat tighter against the unexpected chill. She hadn't planned to come. She'd spent the entire afternoon pacing her office, convincing herself that indulging a man like Vander Grant was reckless. But there she was. The handwritten invitation had led her to a service elevator inside an unmarked building, with a private key card waiting in a discreet envelope at the front desk. She'd stepped inside expecting a dinner or maybe some elaborate view. She hadn't expected the string lights. Rows of them, suspended overhead, crisscrossing the rooftop like constellations. A single table stood near the edge, elegantly set for 2, a small heater humming beside it. And beyond the railing, the skyline stretched endlessly, soft and silver beneath the rising moon. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't expensive for the sake of being expensive. It was quiet, intentional, unmistakably personal. You came, Vander's voice said behind her. She turned. He was in a dark sweater and slacks, his coat open, hands bare. No security, no entourage, no driver in sight, just him. Brooklyn eyed the table. You built a restaurant on a helipad. I figured you might say no to another formal event. I nearly did, but I was curious. He walked past her slowly and pulled out a chair. Then sit. She didn't move. I need to know something first, she said. Ask. Why me? Vander's hands tightened slightly on the backrest. I could tell you it's because you challenge me, because you don't care about my name, because you make me feel something real in the middle of a life built on control. But the truth is, I don't know how to walk away from you. I've tried. It doesn't work. Brooklyn studied him. You're used to people folding. I'm not going to. I'm not asking you to. And you think this, she gestured to the rooftop, is going to win me over? No. I think it's going to show you I'm not afraid to try. After a beat, she stepped forward and sat. Dinner arrived via a silent lift from the floor below. No waiters, no interruptions. Just 2 covered trays and a bottle of wine that Brooklyn recognized from the same vineyard her father had once raved about before his passing. She hadn't mentioned that to anyone. She glanced over. You did research. I listen. They ate slowly. He didn't try to impress her with stories of boardrooms or yachts. Instead, he told her about the first building he ever bought and how terrified he'd been when the bank called his bluff. About the time he'd spilled coffee on a senator's lap during a charity breakfast and tried to pretend it was intentional performance art. Brooklyn laughed for real this time, not politely, not cautiously. When the plates were cleared back into the lift, she stood and walked to the edge of the rooftop. "You know what scares me?" she said without turning. "No, losing what I built because I got distracted by someone who doesn't stay." "I'm not going anywhere," she turned to him, eyes sharper now. "That's easy to say under string lights and skyline views. What about when I get overwhelmed and shut down, when I can't prioritize you because a client's threatening to cancel? When I forget to call back because I'm knee-deep in fire codes at 2 in the morning, I'll show up anyway. And if I don't open the door, I'll wait on the steps." The wind tugged at her hair. She crossed her arms. "I wasn't looking for this, Vander. Neither was I. But you're not letting go." "No." Brooklyn walked back toward him slowly, stopping just inches away. "You don't even know what being with me actually looks like. Then show me." She held his gaze for a long moment before finally reaching up, her fingers brushing the side of his jaw. "I don't fall easily." "I do," she laughed quietly. "Of course you do." He stepped closer, and this time she didn't move away. "I'm not perfect," Vander said. "I already figured that out, but I'm serious." "So am I." He kissed her, not with heat or urgency, but with certainty. As if he'd been waiting for this exact moment and wasn't willing to rush it. Her hand slid around the back of his neck, and for the first time in months, Brooklyn stopped thinking about what came next. They stood there for a long while. Eventually, the wind picked up again, and she stepped back, laughing as his hair shifted slightly. "Okay," she said, breathless. "Fine, you win this round. It's not a game." "I know," she paused, "but it still feels like I just lost." "You didn't. You just started something." He walked her out through the elevator, all the way to the car waiting below. Not a Bentley this time, but a simple town car. She paused with her hand on the door. "You are going to complicate everything, aren't you?" "Definitely." She shook her head, then leaned in and kissed him again, quick and final. "See you tomorrow," she said. "You will." Next morning, Brooklyn arrived at her office to find her assistant standing beside a garment rack. "What's this?" she asked. "Delivery for you, no name, just a note." "Brooklyn, read it once. You've got a gala in 4 hours. Wear this, I'll be waiting." The dress was custom, sleek, not flashy. It fit like it had been made for her because it had. She wore it. Vander met her outside the venue, offering his arm with zero fanfare. Inside, the crowd parted around them like water. Later that night, on the balcony overlooking the East River, Brooklyn turned to him and said, "You're not what I expected." He kissed her temple. "Neither are you." A year later, they stood in the same rooftop where it all began, only this time the table was larger, the lights permanent, and the people gathered were crying as vows were exchanged under the soft glow of the city. Brooklyn held his hand tightly, the woman who built her world from the ground up, now standing beside the man who nearly missed her because of a scheduling error. Vander smiled as she whispered, "Still think you overbooked that room on accident?" He leaned down and said, "Best mistake I ever made." And from that night forward, there were no more cancellations, no more missed meetings, just a calendar permanently blocked off for love. The first real test came 3 months later. Brooklyn was finalizing the largest contract her company had ever been offered, a full-scale, multi-day event design for an international fashion house launching its first flagship in Manhattan. It would cement Prescott Designs as a top-tier player. But the timeline was brutal, the client was exacting, and the budget, though obscene, came with strings attached. She hadn't seen Vander in over a week. Not because she was avoiding him, but because sleep had become a rare commodity and eating was something she did standing up. He hadn't pushed. He'd sent thoughtful things, a box of her favorite oranges from a small grove in California, a playlist of instrumental jazz she used to stay focused, a handwritten quote from a book she'd once told him she loved, but he hadn't demanded time or explanations. Still, when she walked into her studio one Friday evening and found him standing inside with his sleeves rolled up and a paint roller in his hand, she froze. I thought I told you I was behind, she said, setting her tote on the floor. You did, he said, not looking up from the wall he was painting. Which is why I brought 3 people from my construction team to help you finish this mock-up room by midnight. She blinked. You brought contractors. They owed me a favor. And I promised them pizza and hazard pay if you threw anything. She crossed her arms. You're not supposed to fix my business problems. I'm not. I'm just making sure you sleep before sunrise. You don't have to do that. He finally looked over his shoulder. I know. That's why it matters. She didn't respond. Instead, she walked over, took the roller from his hand, and began painting the second panel beside him. They worked silently for a while, and something about the shared focus made her shoulders relax for the first time in days. When the prototype room was finished, glossy black floors, a suspended mirrored ceiling, and a cascade of violet orchids arranged in a spiral down the center, Brooklyn stepped back and whispered, "This might be the best thing I've ever done." "You didn't do it alone," Vander said, leaning against the wall. "I noticed." She walked over to him, her hand brushing a streak of paint on his forearm. "You hate messes." "I don't hate yours." She reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. "You're not just here for the rooftop dinners and gala gowns, are you? I'm here for all of it." "Even this?" Brooklyn rested her head against his shoulder, finally letting herself exhale. 2 weeks later, the event launched to international acclaim. She landed the cover of a major design magazine, and inquiries flooded her inbox. Vander didn't say a word about it until she came home late one night and found a velvet box on the kitchen counter. Inside was a single gold ring, not an engagement band, but a thin, delicate loop engraved on the inside, not with a name, not with a date, with the words, "You never did fold." She slipped it on her finger and walked straight into the bedroom where Vander was reading. He didn't look up right away. She stood in the doorframe, arms crossed. "You really think I'm not going to cry over that? I was hoping you might." She climbed onto the bed beside him. "You give better gifts than I do." "That's not true. You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever want again." "What?" "Someone to come home to." She didn't answer, just leaned in and kissed him once, deliberately. They never talked about marriage in the traditional way. One day over breakfast, he looked up from his paper and said, "Do you want to have dinner with me for the rest of our lives?" She sipped her coffee. "Only if I get to pick the venue sometimes." Deal. They got married in the same building where they'd first met. Not on the 35th floor, but in the garden atrium 5 stories down, the one she'd converted into a private event space after the gala. The ceremony was small, filled with people who'd watched them build something from nothing. Brooklyn wore a structured white gown with a high neckline and a slit up one side. Vander wore a 3-piece suit with no tie, just a watch she'd given him engraved with the coordinates of their first lunch. After the ceremony, as the lights dimmed and the music began, she pulled him aside and whispered, "You still think I'm dangerous?" He leaned down, brushing his lips against her ear. "I think you're everything I didn't know I needed," and she believed him. They bought a townhouse in the West Village, historic on the outside, modern inside, with a rooftop garden she designed herself and a library he filled with first editions. She kept her studio. He kept his empire. But on Friday nights, they both turned off their phones, cooked dinner together, and danced barefoot in the living room to old records that skipped in all the right places. One spring morning, she told him she was pregnant. She didn't cry. She didn't even smile at first. She just held the test in her hand and said, "This changes everything." He took it from her, set it on the counter, and kissed her forehead. "No, this adds to everything." They had a daughter first, me, then a son, Julian. Brooklyn taught them how to build things with their hands. Vander taught them how to ask questions no one else dared to. Years passed, but their rhythm never faltered. They fought sometimes, loud and fast, but they always came back to each other before nightfall. He learned to recognize the look that meant she needed quiet. She learned to hear the pause in his voice that meant he was spiraling into strategy mode and needed anchoring. They never lost the spark, because they'd earned it, fought for it, protected it. One evening, long after the city had changed around them, they stood on the rooftop of the same skyscraper where he'd first set a table beneath the stars. The lights were still strung above, weathered now, but still glowing. Brooklyn leaned against the railing, watching the skyline stretch out like a memory made permanent. "Do you ever think about that first day?" she asked. "The conference room, the double booking, the way I nearly threw my laptop at you." He slid his arm around her waist. "Every time I walk into a meeting and hope someone like you's going to walk in and upend everything." She turned to him, her eyes softer now, older, but no less fierce. "We did all right, didn't we?" "We did more than all right." She rested her head against his chest, and he kissed the top of her hair. Below them, the city pulsed. Around them, the world kept moving. But in that moment, there was nothing but them, not a beginning, not an ending, just forever.